Hello, welcome to Bio 40C. I'm Professor Woods, and today I'm going to take you through some introductory anatomy and physiology.
Review a little bit of the mechanical and physical digestion. Talk a little bit more about the chemical digestion. And if you got 6 out of 10 most of the time on that very first question, the one that you probably want to go in and revise, it's because you didn't talk about the macromolecules, right? Carbohydrates, fats, proteins, and how they get broken down into monomers, right? Carbohydrates get broken down into simple sugars like glucose or fructose. Fats get broken down into fatty acids and absorbed into your lymphatic system and chylomicrons. And proteins get broken down into amino acids, and then those amino acids are incorporated in your body, and they're resynthesized into proteins like muscle proteins or connective tissue proteins like collagen, skin proteins, or any number of proteins around your body. So that was the process that I was looking for there. Admittedly, it was right at the end of class, and it was a bit of a hard rush thing. So, now, if you go into that assignment online, you'll see there's a little bit more information. You can see the chemical breakdown or a food label for an apple, and that gives you a bit more insight into how to answer that question with a bit more detail if you didn't get 10 out of 10 the first time. All right, many of you did. That's cool. And I'm going to do another one of those questions here today, right? And they're basically stretch questions in class, right? So don't expect to get 10 out of 10 on most of them. Most of the time, I'm going to get you to look up some information, write down some information, and you may not get it all, and that's absolutely fine. What I want you to do is go away thinking about it, and then do some work on your own, and then revise and get 100%, right? All good? Great. Okay, so going back to physical, mechanical digestion and chemical digestion. We're doing physical mechanical digestion in the lab today. Everybody did a really good job, and you guys in the afternoon will have a chance to do that as well. I'm going to talk here a little bit about chemical digestion, and then talk a little bit about some medications and things like this. So get a picture of. Okay, so we're talking about the digestive tract, starting with the oral cavity, the teeth for grinding, salivary glands for lubricating the food and also delivering enzymes such as amylase, the esophagus, muscular peristalsis, where we're moving food down into our stomach. There's an epiglottis there, so we don't breathe the food into our lungs. It closes off as you swallow. You can feel your Adam's apple go up when you swallow. When it moves up, it closes off your airways. Has anybody known anybody who's breathed in food or choked because the food has gone down the wrong way? My father nearly died of that. My father is always a bad example, right? But he nearly died of that. He was in a restaurant. He had a piece of steak because it's like genetic, I think. We like eat steak, like eat food way too fast. A piece of steak went down his windpipe and got stuck in there, and somebody actually had to do the Heimlich maneuver. Does anybody know the Heimlich maneuver? Does anybody want to tell us what it is, the Heimlich maneuver? Who wants to? I've seen no, I don't want to tell you. It was Dominic, right? Yeah, maybe you can tell us. Yeah, it's quite a violent action. You come up from behind the person, you come around, you basically want to put a knuckle into the diaphragm and then come in and then up, right? And hopefully that forces enough air to expel whatever is stuck in. And then in my father's case, he's alive, so it worked, right? It saves people's lives. You'd be shocked at how many people every year die from asphyxiation because food goes down the wrong way. Okay, so obviously it goes down to the stomach. We've looked at how the stomach produces acid, and how acid reflux is a problem for many of us, oftentimes I think it's related to fiber intakes. You want to increase your fiber intake if you get a lot of acid reflux, because fiber helps move everything through your gastrointestinal tract, as well as it feeds your microbiome. So fiber is really helpful both for gastrointestinal reflux. And then you have to avoid some foods for gastrointestinal reflux that cause your stomach to secrete a lot of acid. And in the stomach, you've got this mucus lining. You've got a mucus lining here in your esophagus as well. But there's also some bicarbonate there protecting you from the acid. The esophagus doesn't have that, so the acid burns when it splashes up through the esophageal sphincter. And then into your intestines, where a lot of the hard work of the absorption happens, right? There's lots of invaginations, lots of surface area, and that's where most of the enzymes are being secreted by the axillary organs like the bile, but like the gallbladder and the pancreas, even from enzymes from the liver, coming into the small intestine, and then we're breaking down the macronutrients, the carbohydrates, the complex carbohydrates. We're breaking down the proteins into amino acids, and we're breaking down the fats into fatty acids so we can absorb them. Okay. You have to break everything down to absorb it, right? It has to be broken down into the monomers, then you can absorb it, then it gets resynthesized into you. Okay, where am I? Yeah, food and digestive tract. Oh yeah, this is worth knowing. The digestive tract, and I said this to my nutrition class and they went, no, it's not. But you can have your own opinion on this. But the way we think in anatomy and physiology about the digestive tract is it's outside the body. Does that make sense? Right? Because it contacts outside here and outside there. And it's so essentially it's a tube that's continuous with the outside. Okay. And in large part, that's because that's why we have such a big immune system there as well, is to protect you from that outside and organisms that might be trying to invade from the outside into your body. So that's why it's very protective, like the skin, right? The skin protects us from the outside. So we've got this is a major immune organ as well. And that can go wrong with diseases like inflammatory bowel disease, Crohn's disease. That's where inflammation is reacting, overly reacting, sometimes to foods, sometimes to microorganisms. And so that's another thing that can go wrong with your gastrointestinal tract. Yeah, so here we go. Mechanical digestion, chemical digestion of carbohydrates starts with amylase, and there are some lipid digesting enzymes as well in your saliva. Mechanical digestion includes the peristalsis, that squeezing of the food down through the esophagus into your stomach. You can see some absorption of lipid-soluble substances in the stomach. Actually, glucose can be absorbed already in the mouth. Glucose can start to be absorbed, and then in the stomach as well, glucose can start to be absorbed. That's one of the earliest things that hits us, which is, again, a reason why we like sweet foods. But in the stomach, there is a lot of musculature, right? 3 different layers of muscle that are crushing and digesting the food. The chemical digestion continues further with digestion of the carbohydrates, fats, and proteins. Amylase. Yeah, chemical digestion includes pepsins, lingual lipase. This is when it says lipase, that means fatty acid. The lingual lipase and the gastric lipase are helping to digest fats. You've got lipases in your intestines. You've got amylase to break down those carbohydrates, the starches. You've got trypsin, which is a peptidase, which breaks down proteins. The acid here in your stomach also denatures proteins, which makes them more accessible for those enzymes to get in there and clip the proteins into amino acids. So there are peptidases. What else? There's large brush border to help with the absorption. And there are enzymes like sucrase, which breaks down sucrose. Sucrose is table sugar, right? Table sugar is sucrose. It's a disaccharide of glucose and fructose joined together. And you need to clip it in half into the glucose and the fructose, and then you'll absorb both. And then your liver will take that fructose and turn it into glucose. Okay, so now we're going to talk about some medical recommendations with regard to certain antacids and certain pain relievers in terms of how they affect stomach acidity and propensity to develop ulcers and things like that. We'll talk a little bit about that, and then we'll dive into a little bit more depth into the absorption of the carbohydrates, the fats, and the proteins. Okay, so digestive system. We've done this review, so I'm going to skip through here. Chemical. Okay, so gastric acid and the musculature around the stomach are super important. So the musculature around the stomach, just to review, is crushing all that food. We've got this liquid chyme in here where the food is being turned into mush, essentially. And at the same time, we've got acid being secreted into the stomach. Now, we've all talked about how that acid can come up here through the esophageal sphincter and called gastrointestinal reflux. And another way of treating gastrointestinal reflux instead of using Zantac, and George was asking me this earlier, right? Use Prilosec, Ozempic. I'm getting ahead of myself. Prilosec. Prilosec is a proton pump inhibitor. Okay, so it's a proton pump inhibitor. What do you think that is doing to the environment of the stomach? Who's going to tell me? George, you can't answer this question because you know the answer. Anybody got an answer? What's going to happen if we take a chemical here, a pharmaceutical that inhibits proton pumps? What's a proton? Yeah. That's great. Did everybody get that? It become less acidic, right? Protons, hydrogen ions with a positive charge, are acid. That's acid, right? So a proton pump inhibitor, it prevents the protons that are being made in your stomach being pumped into the stomach, right? Because that pump is being inhibited. So when you don't have protons being pumped into the stomach acidity will start to decline, get lower and lower. So this is commonly prescribed for people who have gastrointestinal reflux. I take it from time to time because I get gastrointestinal reflux. Thanks, Mom and Dad. Some of you might occasionally suffer from gastrointestinal reflux as well. And I was saying to George a little earlier on that one of the things you can do is avoid trigger foods. So tomatoes are a food that trigger gastrointestinal reflux for a lot of people. Mint is something that triggers gastrointestinal reflux for me. So I have to avoid minty foods. And you guys were joking about how I have to use bubblegum tasting toothpaste to avoid mint. But there are some other, every person is a bit different. So things that trigger acid, too much acid production in your stomach can differ from person to person. If you don't have this problem, awesome. That's great. I hope your esophageal sphincter works well. Yeah, so what is that? Okay, the carbon dioxide and water with the enzyme carbonic anhydrase creates these hydrogen ions and carbonic acid, and then the stomach, the lumen of the stomach here, potassium goes in, hydrogen ions go out, and this is the proton pump, right? And we're going to be inhibiting the proton pump here with Prilosec. So protons won't be going in to the lumen of your stomach, to the inside of your stomach. So you don't get this acid. Okay, so another thing that might happen is non-steroidal. I'm going to have to work out why I get a temperature warning. It's hot. non-steroidal anti-inflammatories, things like Advil and ibuprofen. This is probably something that many of us take, right? Advil and ibuprofen. These things can inhibit, indirectly inhibit bicarbonate secretion and mucus production. So if you're inhibiting bicarbonate secretion and mucus production in your stomach, what's that going to do? Yeah, I think that's exactly it, right? Did everybody hear that? Okay, so when you're producing less bicarbonate and less mucus, then the acid that is there is potentially going to damage the lining of the stomach, and because it's damaging the lining of the stomach, you can end up with an ulcer, right? Did I get that right? Perfect. Yeah, so you're ending up with a potential to damage the stomach lining if you're taking Advil and ibuprofen. And this doesn't happen to everybody, but if you take too much of it, it's a risk. Okay. Who might take a lot of Advil and ibuprofen?
Who?
Yeah, who? What sort of patients?
People with pain.
Yeah, people with recurrent pain, probably, things like migraines and stuff. Maybe. Did you have another idea? Athletes. I hope not. Yeah, but you're right. Like after exercise, oftentimes you get a lot of muscle pain, and people do reach for these things very quickly. But something that I'd like you to know is that part of the process of getting stronger when you're working out and you're doing athletic is that pain, right? Is that inflammation? That inflammatory response is part of the response for rebuilding. So you really don't want to inhibit it. So it's not a great idea to take anti-inflammatories if you're an athlete. I wouldn't do it. In addition to being bad for your stomach, it's also going to inhibit the gains that you potentially make from your workouts, because that inflammation is actually part of the process of remodeling your muscles. So, yeah, I know people do that. Don't. Yeah.
People with fibromyalgia?
Yeah, anybody with some kind of pro-inflammatory condition like arthritis or anything like that, oftentimes they'll take quite large doses of these, and then there'll be a risk for stomach problems like ulcers. Yeah. Okay, today I'm going to ask you about Ozempic, so that'll be fun. That's the latest. That's the latest pharmaceutical craze. Many people are using this. It was originally approved for treating diabetes, but it has effects in diabetic patients in terms of weight loss. And now people are starting to use it for weight loss and sometimes for appearance, right? They'd like to look a particular way. They'd like to shed a few pounds to look. So in that regard, that's not what this pharmaceutical is for. This pharmaceutical is there to treat people who have a condition like diabetes, or maybe are suffering from obesity, which again is a medical condition. Oftentimes, there's a confusion between healthy weight and obesity. Obesity is a clinical condition. Healthy weight is everybody else, hopefully. This is also underweight. Okay, so we've done some of these activities here. I've gone through this already. Okay, stomach acids. Right. The esophagus is lined by a stratified squamous epithelium, which protects against physical stress. Okay, so it protects against the food sliding down and damaging on the way down. Also, in the esophagus, it produces mucus, but it doesn't protect very well against the acid. The stomach cells reproduce extremely quickly. So they only live about 3 days because the environment in the stomach is very, very harsh. There's rapid turnover of stomach cells going on all the time. The muscles of the esophagus are doing this peristalsis to move food, so it doesn't store very long. The stomach has extra muscle layers that we'll look at in lab, and these strong muscular movements sometimes overwhelm the esophageal sphincter, and they basically squirt that acid back up into your esophagus. That weak esophageal sphincter can cause that regurgitation, causing GERD, and the esophageal cells do not produce bicarbonate, okay? Whereas the stomach cells do produce some bicarbonate to protect against acid. An overactive gastrin and G cells, or overactive parasympathetic nervous system, an underactive. Medications for reflux tend to alter the activity of those G cells in terms of things like the response to histamines, or their response to or the pumping of hydrogen ions. Okay, so we talked about this already. If you have the flu, for example, and you want to take something for a fever or for aches and pains, the doctor might recommend ibuprofen. But if you have a problem with ulcers or gastric problems, then this would be contraindicated. Ibuprofen is an inhibitor of an enzyme called cyclooxygenase, and cyclooxygenases produce prostaglandins, which are pro-inflammatory molecules. So you want to take an anti-inflammatory when you've got an inflammation like a flu, right? So you take these anti-inflammatory molecules that reduce inflammation, but they also reduce mucus production, they also reduce bicarbonate production, and ultimately they can cause stomach problems. So if you are not careful, if you take too much of these anti-inflammatories, you can end up with ulceration because the acid starts to burn through the bicarbonate and the mucus layer, protecting your stomach lining. Okay. So I'm going to talk about how we absorb simple sugars. I'm going to talk about how we absorb amino acids. I'm going to talk about how we absorb fatty acids. Now, simple sugars go directly into the blood. Amino acids go directly into the blood. Fatty acids go into the lymphatic system from your intestines. So now, when simple sugars and amino acids go directly into the blood, they enter from your gastrointestinal tract. They drain into the hepatic portal vein. Hepatic is liver. Portal vein means these will go initially directly past the liver. Now, if there are any toxins or anything in our food as well, they'll go past the liver, and the liver is extremely good at detoxifying. On the other hand, fatty acids go into the lymphatic system. They go under they enter the subclavian vein, which is right near the heart. So fats get dumped right on top of this organ. This is one of the reasons why we want to be cautious with the types of fats that we have in our diet. So you should have about 25 to 30% of your calories should be coming from fats, but the type of fat really matters. If the rule of thumb is if it's an animal fat or it's solid at room temperature, then it's going to be bad internally as well. So fats that are solid or saturated fats are not so great when they hit your heart. So the liver will see the carbohydrates and the amino acids coming in immediately, and it'll start to balance out those chemicals and start to store carbohydrates, store glucose as glycogen, and it'll regulate some of the amino acid production. And this is all going to start off with your liver. Okay. Hepatocytes are going to be storing nutrients. They're going to be making proteins from those amino acids, and they're basically getting ready to deliver those nutrients. It's helping to deliver those nutrients around your body to the places they need to go. Hepatocytes also produce bile, and bile is used to dissolve fats, and I'll talk about that here in a second. Bile is used to help us absorb fats. Okay, so let's start with fats. What's going on with fats? When you digest fats with lipases, the enzymes in your intestinal tract, it'll break down fats into fatty acids, and those large fatty acids, we're talking about the large fats now, will start to form very large globules of fat that will get absorbed into the lacteal or lymphatic system, which is connected to all of your small intestines. And so fats start to enter your body here. It's these large fatty globules called chylomicrons. Now, if you eat a fatty meal and the nurse takes your blood, do you know what color it is?
White or yellowish?
Yeah, it's white and milky. Why would it be white and milky? Yeah, exactly. Because of the fats. It's got big globules of fat, chylomicrons in it. Yeah, big globules. So much that it'll actually change the color of your blood from red to some milky pink kind of color. Yeah. Have you done that? Have you pulled blood? Oh, okay. I thought you might have seen it. It changes your perspective to know that there's that much fat that can go in from a fatty meal, right? There's a lot of fat that's going in. That's why you want to be careful the kinds of fats. You want to be careful with those hard fats, because those hard fats are the ones that can cause blockages ultimately in your arteries. Now, chylomicrons will enter in the subclavian vein, will enter your bloodstream, and then those chylomicrons are now circulating around in your blood, and they will go past your liver. Okay. And your liver says, okay, you've got a lot of fat. We've got a lot of fat now from that meal. We need to do something with it. And the liver will start to put some postage stamps on it, apolipoproteins and the like. So first of all, bile salts are helping dissolve these fats here. So I'll show you what those are here in a second. But bile salts are molecules that can contain cholesterol. They have based on cholesterol structurally. And bile salts will dissolve fatty acids, and they'll be here in these chylomicrons. Then the liver is going to add apolipoproteins onto your VLDLs, which are very low density lipoproteins. If you go to get your lipid levels measured, a doctor is going to start to measure things like VLDLs, very low density lipoproteins. And then these will circulate around your body and start to deliver fat, right? So they'll deliver fat to your muscles. Your muscles have stores of fat in them for burning, for using, for energy. Where else will you store fat? Yeah, you store fat in your liver. That's a really good point, actually. Oftentimes we store fat in our liver. Yeah. And you said?
Oh, around our organs.
Around our organs. Visceral fat around our organs. That's the worst place to store fat. Why would it be bad to store fat around our organs? What if I told you fat clogs things up and stops things working? Yeah. So we don't want to really be storing too much fat around our organs because it clogs things up and stops them working. Where else might we store fat? There is actually a lot of fat in the brain, around the nerves. Yeah. Around the heart. We don't really want to store it there. Where are we storing it though? Around our middle, on our butts, in our arms and our legs. We're storing it in all kinds of places, but adipose tissues, right? We've got these specialized adipose tissues where we're storing fat. So we'll store a lot of this fat. We'll store a lot of this fat when there's a lot of glucose around, because glucose is the number one fuel. If there's a lot of sugar in your system, then your liver will say, send all of that fat to your adipose tissues. Send it to the places that most of us don't want to store fat, right? So it'll the liver says, okay, send all of that fat and store it, right? That's what happens when you have lots of sugar in your system and lots of fat in your system. That's called a standard American diet, a SAD diet, right? So high in fat, high in sugar. When you have high fat and high sugar, what are most desserts? Most desserts are high in fat, high in sugar. Yeah. Why is it that nutrition people always tell you don't eat too many desserts? Because they're high in fat, high in sugar. And what happens is when there's a lot of sugar going around your system, the insulin and the liver is saying, okay, store those fats, put them into your adipose tissue. Yeah. Ultimately, the VLDLs, the very low density lipoproteins, will become low density lipoproteins, which you can measure, which doctors can measure in the doctor's office when they take a blood sample. And then ultimately they're empty. And when they're empty, they become high density, HDL, high density lipoproteins. And high density lipoproteins are good. We want more of those. So you often hear people talk about bad cholesterol and good cholesterol. I don't like to think of it that way, but there are a lot of people that talk about the bad cholesterol. And the bad cholesterol is these chylomicrons, VLDLs, and LDLs. These are the ones that are delivering fats to your muscles and to your adipose tissue. And then HDLs are the ones that are now empty, and they're basically taking away all the extra cholesterol that was up here initially put into these chylomicrons and taking it back to the liver. Okay? And then that cholesterol gets resynthesized into bile salts, and those bile salts go into your intestines, and then they'll help you absorb more fat. So yeah, when we look at the fats are made up of these phospholipids, triglycerols, these cholesterol esters, free cholesterols, apolipoproteins, and there's bile salts in here as well, dissolving all of these things. Like when it talks about cholesterol esters, these are really bile salts. And then there are these proteins that say, okay, these are the delivery stamps saying, okay, let's deliver these fats around the body. That you find them in VLDLs and LDLs. Bad cholesterol, right? That's what your doctor will think of as bad cholesterol. When the fats have been delivered here, and you've just got the apolipoproteins and those cholesterol esters left, because all the fatty acids, the triglycerides, and the phospholipids have been delivered, then you have HDLs, and they're really helpful. They can actually suck some of the extra fats out of your any damage that might be into your arteries and take it back to your liver to go back into this whole process and recycle into this whole process here. Okay, so chylomicrons, large, very, very less dense. These transport fats to the liver where they start to get processed. Very low density lipoproteins, they're made in the liver, and they function to deliver fats around the body. Low density lipoproteins are still delivering fat to cells. The liver is regulating VLDLs and LDLs. These are bad cholesterol. And then you have high density lipoproteins. They're empty. These are good cholesterol. And they're removing cholesterol from cells and taking it back to the liver. And they're turning that cholesterol and recycling it, turning it into bile salts. And these actually have anti-inflammatory properties, these HDLs. Mm-hmm. How do you increase HDLs? How might you get more of these empty recycling vesicles? What was that?
Oh, it's a diet.
Not really.
No?
Not so much. So these are delivering fats. How can you empty the delivery trucks faster? Hmm? The fiber's got a different interesting thing that I'll get to in a minute. How do you empty the fats from the trucks? What are you going to use those fats for? Energy, right? So how are you going to burn more fat? Exercise, exactly. So if you exercise more, these good fats, these good HDLs, the ones that are recycling, they go up. So exercise will give you more HDLs. Okay. Good. Yeah, so here's what this whole thing looks like. Your intestines, you're absorbing chylomicrons here. These big fatty globules go to the liver. The liver makes VLDLs. They deliver fats. LDLs deliver fats to cells. And then the empty the empty LDLs and VLDLs form high-density lipoproteins. This is called the reverse cholesterol transport, and they'll go back to the liver, and then back in the liver, they'll be synthesized into new VLDLs or into bile salts, which helps absorb more fats. So somebody asked, what's a doctor going to be looking for? They're going to be looking for this total cholesterol to HDL ratio. So that's the number they're looking for. So this is an example of a person's blood lipid profile. A doctor ran this. Who do you think the doctor ran this on? Just have a guess, wild guess.
Average person.
Oh, it's me.
Oh.
Good guess. This is me. So fortunately, my lipid profile is okay. Yeah. Otherwise, I'd be on statins or something. So it looks at my total cholesterol here, which is a combination of the LDLs and the HDLs and the VLDLs, all of that there. That's the total cholesterol. And then the HDL cholesterol here, which is, in my case, it's 68 milligrams per deciliter. Greater than 40 is what you're shooting for. You'd like to have greater than 40. Why is mine higher?
You do triathlon.
Because I exercise as much as I can, and I have to. Otherwise, I probably have bad lipid profile. My lipid profile wouldn't be good. And then you see this cholesterol to HDL ratio, 174 divided by 63. Okay, my number is 2.6. It's less than 5. Good. Doctor says you don't need statins. You're okay. Okay. Statins are pharmaceuticals that lower your synthesis of cholesterol. So you reduce the amount of cholesterol you synthesize. You can still eat cholesterol, but it reduces the amount of cholesterol that you make endogenously. And that cholesterol is going to be used for bile salts, and those bile salts are going to be used to absorb fats. So by lowering your cholesterol, you're lowering the amount of fat that you're absorbing as well. There's another way to lower your cholesterol, to lower bile salts, and that was getting back to this question over here of fiber, right? High fiber diet, which is a good question. What does a high fiber diet do? Well, fibers, in addition to feeding your microbiome, trap bile salts, trap cholesterol. And when they trap cholesterol, those fibers, you can't absorb them, right? Because we don't have enzymes to digest them. So those fibers trap cholesterol, and basically you eliminate cholesterol. So when you see like a diet high in fiber can reduce cholesterol on labels, on product labels, that's what's going on, is the cholesterol is being eliminated because it's trapped in the fibers. Yeah.
Having high cholesterol,
Mm-hmm.
like my dad or my mom has high cholesterol.
Right.
What exactly does that mean then?
So some people, or quite a few people really, produce a lot of, make a lot of cholesterol. And basically they're making a lot of bile salts, which means that they've got a lot of the molecules that are used to absorb fats from the diet.
Right.
So people who have high cholesterol, because they synthesize high cholesterol in their liver, they synthesize a lot of bile salts, they synthesize a lot of the molecules used to extract fats from their diet. So those people are particularly good at extracting fat
Right.
from their diet. Right.
But
So
then it causes them to have high cholesterol.
that's right. So if you're good at extracting fat from your diet, so why in evolutionary terms would it be an advantage to absorb more fat than your skinny neighbor?
Yeah, and energy.
Yeah, for energy. So when times are lean, you're a good fat storer, right? So who made it through those long winters in evolutionary history when times were lean? People who are good at storing fat. Okay. Unfortunately, now in modern society, where there's a lot of available fat and a lot of available sugar, if you happen to be one of those people that historically would have made it, because you're a good fat storer, now you're a good fat storer with too much fat available in your diet.
Okay.
And so
That makes sense.
obesity often will result, and then cardiovascular disease, because you're so good at absorbing fat and there's nowhere to put it. And so you get diabetes and you get cardiovascular disease. So heart attacks and strokes, diabetes, which are the things that kill a lot of modern people because actually we're a bit too good at extracting fat out of our diets. See, you'd like to be a bit worse at doing that. And statins are these drugs which inhibit your liver's ability to make cholesterol. So when you inhibit your ability to make cholesterol, you've got less ability to absorb fats. So you lower your total cholesterol lowers, so you're delivering less fats around your body. And so overall, that can help reduce your risk of heart attacks and strokes, and even diabetes, but heart attacks and strokes primarily. That's what they're used for. And in fact, statins also have another fascinating side effect, which is probably one of the more important things that they do. They inhibit inflammation as well. And the precise mechanisms aren't really very well understood, but statins also inhibit inflammation. So there's a very curious observation, and the observation is as follows. People who have high cholesterol and then are put on statins tend to outlive people who are not on statins. What? Yeah. The numbers are very close, but there's a slight benefit to being on statins versus not being on statins.
Why is that?
Because it's anti-inflammatory and it reduces the overall damage from inflammatory conditions. And now society has a lot of pro-inflammatory conditions. A lot of sugar, which is pro-inflammatory. A lot of exposure to environmental chemicals like smoking, which is very pro-inflammatory. So over a vast number of people, there's a slight advantage to being on statins in terms of morbidity and mortality, death, basically. Slight reduction in death by actually taking statins on average. So there was a point where they were like, maybe we should give statins to everybody. But statins do have side effects. They can cause muscle pain and so on. Okay, I'm going to skip through here because we talked about all of this here. I will just mention here, okay, I've said, be careful of fats, right? But really I'm talking about animal fats. And animal fats, the other fats like oils, fats in vegetables, vegetable oils, fats in olive oil, all kinds of canola oil, corn oil, they're all liquids at room temperature. But fats that are solid at room temperature, animal fats found in red meat particularly, tend to, when there's damage to a blood vessel, what causes damage to a blood vessel? Well, chemicals in cigarette smoke or any kind of smoke for that matter. Cannabis causes just as much damage as cigarette smoke. The chemicals that you breathe in go straight into your blood system and they can cause damage to the walls of your arteries. And then this basically is white blood cell infiltrate trying to fix the damage, right? So white blood cells going in there trying to fix the damage, and then a cap over the top of fibroblasts growing over the top here. And so it's a fibrous cap, and fibroblasts are the same cells that you have in your skin that will form scars, right? So this is basically like forming a scar inside of your artery, essentially. And then these white blood cells, eventually they form these things, these foamy cells, the macrophages, they start to absorb fats from the blood, right? And so these white blood cells start to absorb fats. If they absorb hard fats, then this becomes a hard plaque. So there's some calcification that goes on here as well that I won't talk about. But if you're absorbing hard fats here, then this forms a structure, a damage inside of your blood vessel that can be quite hard. And sometimes this fibrous plaque will peel off and do this, right? And it'll block the artery, right? Now, if that artery is supplying blood to your heart muscle, now there's no blood going to your heart muscle. So what is that? Yeah, myocardial infarct. It's a heart attack, right? It's blocking the delivery of oxygen to your blood, so your cells are dying off. If that happens in your brain, what happens there? Stroke, yeah. Yeah, stroke. Because now there's no blood going to those neurons in your brain, and they can die off as well. That could be stroke. Yeah?
So when people receive triple bypass, they
Yeah.
sometimes get an artery
That's right.
from their leg.
Yes.
And is that the reason why?
Yeah. So a bypass is if this thing grows and grows and grows until it occludes most of the artery, and there's very little blood flow that's going through here. Oftentimes they'll take an artery from your leg, usually, and they'll just create a bypass. So they'll just put a little, detour, right? Detour, that's what it is. It's just a detour for the blood to go around. And a triple bypass is 3 of them. It's an amazing piece of surgery. Like, I wouldn't want to do it. But there are people who are super skilled and they can do this and they can do triple bypass surgery. Another way of opening this up is to put a stent in here, a piece of metal in here, which will open up that blockage. Cool. Okay, so carbohydrates, let's talk about them next. Carbohydrate digestion occurs with these enzymes like pancreatic amylase, which is digesting starch, turning it into maltose, and then that maltose turns into glucose. Maltase, which is taking the disaccharide of glucose and turning it into glucose so you can absorb the glucose. Sucrase, which is breaking up the disaccharide of glucose and fructose, and so you can absorb the glucose and you can absorb the fructose. You have to break them down. Disaccharides don't get absorbed. Lactase is an interesting one. If you're lactose intolerant, the amount of lactase that you've produced in life has declined as you've gotten older. Babies all have lactase so they can drink milk because this is milk sugar, lactase. And it's a glucose molecule with a galactose molecule, and you have to clip the galactose molecule off and the glucose molecule off so you can absorb the glucose and absorb the galactose. If you don't have the enzyme that does that clip, what happens is that lactose stays in your gastrointestinal tract, and there are many microbes and there are many bacteria, lactobacilli, that love to eat lactose. And they'll eat lactose and they'll cause gastrointestinal distress. And if you have lactose intolerance, you know that drinking milk, which has a lot of lactose in it, will give you this discomfort, basically from the overgrowth of those microbes in your gut. The current recommendations are that you shouldn't avoid all lactose-containing products because many of the products that have lactose in them, milk products and dairy products and so on, are also quite high in calcium and magnesium. They're pretty good calcium and magnesium sources. But try to moderate to the level where you feel comfortable. Obviously, you don't want discomfort. Yeah, question? Okay, so these carbohydrates, they're taken up from the lumen of our gastrointestinal tract. This would be the inside or the outside, if you will, of the body, where the fructose, the monomeric sugar, is uptaken it goes via a transport protein by facilitated diffusion. So fructose will go into the blood, and then glucose with sodium is absorbed into the blood. Ever wonder why Gatorade has salt in it, has sodium in it? Well, it's so you can absorb glucose faster, right? So that's why Gatorade has got a bit of sodium in it. And then fructose here. Nowadays, sports scientists are looking at mixing glucose and fructose. So the latest sports drinks have a mixture of glucose and fructose, so you can get more glucose in, more fructose and glucose in, more sugar into your body per hour for sports. I wouldn't recommend that if you're not doing a really active sport, but if you're doing an Ironman triathlon, this stuff actually becomes quite important. Now, protein. We want the amino acids from foods. We want to absorb those amino acids, so we have to break down the proteins into their monomeric units, 20 different amino acids, and then we're going to absorb those amino acids. One way that we help our digestive tract, so the acid is denaturing, but another way that we can denature foods is by cooking them. By cooking foods, we can help denature the proteins, and here's an egg full of protein. It's being cooked, and what happens is the proteins are globules, but when you heat them up, they open up and they expand, and then they form this white gelatinous mess, but that is much easier for enzymes to get in there and clip into amino acids so you can absorb those amino acids. So denaturation or cooking makes digestion easier. Now, it's a twin-edged sword, because overcooking, like my mom likes to do with vegetables, overcooking can result in leaching of some of the vitamins and the minerals that are in the food, and so you can lose some of them. And I shouldn't criticize my mom's cooking, right? But sometimes there's delicious looking broccoli or asparagus or something, and it goes in, and then she cooks it so long that it becomes mush, and all of the vitamins and minerals come out. You can sort of see that because the water goes green, right? Because they're leaching out all of the chemicals, so that a lot of the vitamins and minerals. So you want to balance cooking and not overcooking when you're cooking foods. So just throwing that in there. Yeah, hydrochloric acid denatures proteins as well. Again, it opens them up. So a cooked egg is denatured proteins. That's what's happened to the proteins there. And that allows these enzymes like pepsin or pepsinogen to get in there and further chop up those proteins into the amino acids, and then you can absorb those. And then those amino acids are taken up into the blood. Now, oftentimes sports people are really interested in, how do I maximize muscle gains, right? How do I turn these amino acids into muscles, right? First of all, you've got to work out, right? So to get muscle hypertrophy, bigger muscles, growth in the muscles, you need to stress the muscles so they will start to grow. But also you need to supply amino acids. And amino acids go into your body fairly quickly from proteins. So they're available after you eat for 2 or 3 hours, and then the levels will come back down again. So if you really want to maximize muscle gains, I hear people, see people like pounding protein shakes immediately after their workouts. Well, it's still the amino acids are still going to stay in your system only 2 or 3 hours. So in fact, if you want to maximize muscle gains, you need to have small amounts of protein all day long, and especially before sleep. Why? Because before sleep, sleep is the time when your muscles are doing nothing. Sleep is the time where your muscles can rebuild the most. So you definitely want to have that protein shake before you go to sleep. Interesting. Yeah, that's where I see most athletes making the mistakes. I do a sport nutrition class, and I have all these football players, and they wake up in the morning, they have a piece of toast, and then they go to the gym and they work out for 2 hours. Now, they don't have any amino acids in their system because they haven't eaten any protein. So they've worked out for 2 hours, tired their muscles, damaged their muscles, but they're not rebuilding their muscles. So they're basically hungry, and their body starts to turn the broken down proteins from their muscles into glucose because they're so hungry. And their brain needs glucose, your body needs glucose, so it'll turn amino acids into glucose. So basically, they spend all morning breaking their muscles down, and then in the evening, they eat a massive dinner, and then they'll start to do some protein resynthesis. So they probably break their muscle down in the morning, and then make the same amount that they broke down in the evening, and then they're like, why aren't they getting any stronger? Well, because you're treading evenly. What they need to be doing is getting protein in the morning, going to do their workout, getting a small amount of protein after their workout, having a lunch, having some protein there, having their dinner, not so big because they don't need quite as many calories because they spread it throughout the day, and then just before they go to sleep, have a protein shake, so all during the night they're resynthesizing their muscle building. Okay. That is the scientifically proven way to maximize muscle gains, is to actually spread the protein throughout the day. Okay. Most of us, we're not breaking down enough muscle to warrant doing that. Yeah, so we've got this dietary amino acids, goes into this amino acid pool that's in our blood. It only lasts 2 or 3 hours, really. We want that when those proteins, these amino acids are available, they'll go into protein synthesis, making muscles and the like. And some of these will get broken down, particularly if you work out a lot. If you have too many amino acids, like you just pound a massive protein shake straight after your workout, then some of those amino acids will get catabolized and broken down into urea and carbon dioxide. And so basically those big protein shakes are often just a way of making very smelly urine. And so this is where you get rid of the nitrogen found on amino acids. Yeah. Okay. Right. So I want to quickly get through controlling food intake. So one of the most interesting things that's happened recently is how we regulate food intakes. And there were some studies done in mice where it was discovered that fatty acids and triglyceride ingestion led to the release of a hormone called leptin. And there was a mouse that was mutant for leptin, this mouse here. And you can see that this mouse suffers from obesity and actually diabetes as well. So this mouse is very sad. These poor little these ghrelin mutant mice. They suffer from obesity when they're given a standard American diet, right, which is normal rat food or mouse food. And that's sad. I've seen these mice. You have to go in every morning and turn them back onto their feet, because at night they climb up the walls of and they fall over on their backs and they can't get up. It's really sad. So anyway, but they are a very interesting model, and it does tell us that there are hormones. This is a peptide hormone which regulates food intakes in mice. Okay, so we thought that when this came out, everyone was like, haha, we've got this, we're going to be making this stuff, and people are never going to have to eat too much again because we're going to be able to give it to people, and that's going to work great. Turns out that mice and humans are different, and this hormone doesn't work the same way in humans. But leptin inhibits appetite. Okay, leptin levels rise when the stomach walls are stretched. But it turns out that I talked about the vagus nerve, the nervous system that goes to the stomach and detects stretching of the stomach, and talks to the cells of the stomach as well. So there are there's neuronal signals that go up to the brain that regulate appetite. The Japanese have a really good suggestion, which is stop eating when you're 80% full. I think that's a great idea. So the stomach makes more of this hormone when ghrelin affects nutrient intake. Yeah, when you're hungry. Makes less of it when you're full. So it helps to regulate appetite. Now, our regulation is from the hypothalamus here. We've got some neuronal signals that talk to the stomach, and the stomach talks back to the feeding center here. And so we've got this regulation in the hypothalamus that regulates hunger. Now, it turns out for us, it's not leptin that's so important. There are a number of hormones that are important, but one of those hormones, it's not just this one, but there are many that are important. GIP, glucose-dependent insulinotropic peptide. That's the one I forgot. Yes. Yeah, GIP. GIP and GLP. These are GLP-1. This is has the ability to regulate appetite. GLP-1. It's a 30 amino acid long peptide. It's actually derived from glucagon. So insulin is released when glucose levels rise, and when glucose levels fall, glucagon is released, and glucagon levels promote the manufacture of glucose in the liver and so on. But GLP-1 is derived from glucagon, and it's this peptide that is involved in decreasing blood sugar levels, and it enhances the secretion of insulin. But not only that, it also talks to the brain and to that region in the hypothalamus. So there are a number of GLP-1 related pharmaceuticals right now. One of them here is Ozempic, right? And it's given as an injection. It's approved for type 2 diabetes in adults, and it offers this thing here, which people are very interested in, weight loss. There are some other regulators here as well. Mounjaro is one I see advertised an awful lot. Trulicity is another one I see advertised a lot on television. So these are the latest trends in the pharmaceutical industry. So what's going on here? GLP-1, the hormone, the drugs are agonists. They're peptides. You have to inject these into your body because you couldn't eat them because they're just like any other protein. They get destroyed by your stomach acid and the peptidases in your stomach. So you have to inject them directly into you. So when you inject this GLP-1 agonist into your body, it talks to your brain to decrease appetite and make you feel full. Okay, so that's what GLP-1 does. And people who take this oftentimes report that they just don't even like the look of food. Sometimes they feel nauseous when they look at food. So not only that, GLP-1 has effects on the kidney, has effects on muscle that are the same as insulin. Basically, it helps you store more glucose as glycogen, and it helps you burn more glucose as well. So that's what this thing is doing. And in adipose tissue, it increases fat burning. So people start to lose weight because they're not feeling hungry, they're burning more fat, and they're using more sugar. So that's what's going on with these drugs. Pretty fascinating. It also helps increase insulin secretion, which is why some of these things happen. Decreases glucagon secretion, which has the opposite effect of insulin. Its main function was actually to regulate feedback regulate glucagon. That's one of its main functions. As a result, it also prevents your liver making glucose, and your liver can turn amino acids and proteins into glucose if it needs to. So these are all of the functions of GLP-1. Basically, it increases your sensitivity to insulin, and it turns down hunger. Right? Turns down your hunger genes. So this pharmaceutical is multi-billion-dollar pharmaceutical right now. And it's the latest trend. It's probably going to be used instead of things like gastric bypass surgeries and stomach surgeries to prevent people who suffer from obesity having too much food. And it's very common for people who suffer from diabetes to also suffer from obesity. And if you reduce your body weight, sometimes diabetes can be reversed, especially in the early year or two. Okay, so considering GLP-1, I would like, here we've got the last 10 minutes, 15 minutes or so. Could you just hand them along? I'd like you to take our sheet, and obviously this is going to be something that you're going to be able to revise later on, but take one of these cards. I'd like you to talk about GLP-1 agonists, particularly Ozempic. Find out how it's dosed, how it's given to a patient. I've told you some of this, but you can look it up too. What it's going to be doing for weight loss. I haven't told you, but it alters blood pressure as well, because it has those effects on the kidney. Take a look at what it does for digestion, appetite, blood glucose, blood lipids, side effects, and are the cards still being passed along? It's cool. Thank you. Work with others, chat amongst yourselves, use the internet, search. Feel free to walk around and talk to other people, and do all of that.